Hi, everybody, and welcome once again to our webinar today, titled How to Implement Serialization and Traceability Without Breaking the Bank. Hi, everyone. My name is Dari Odumade. I'm founder and CEO at Checky Technologies. And I just want to say thank you very much for being here today. And also thank you to our awesome speakers that have decided to join us today as well. Our first speaker for today, he's going to be speaking on the topic, how can donors work with drug manufacturers to help subsidize traceability efforts? And this is definitely someone that has a lot of experience in the supply chain space, particularly for consumer goods. And Apuva has also been a huge mentor to me as well in these recent times, and I've learned a lot from him, particularly around supply chain within this ecosystem. And it's my pleasure to introduce Apuva, who has, over the last 10 years, has done extensive work in building the operations in Africa and the rest of the Gulf region for Jumia. He has traveled across the world, building supply chain networks and teams for close to 20 years now. He has major motivation. His major motivation is to create an impact in the world by touching the lives of many people as possible. And one of the great projects that Apuva also told me recently that he's working on is around actually water supply within neighborhoods that really lack it, which I think is something very super touching. And I really love that impact story about you, Apuva. Thank you very much for being here today. Please feel free to unmute yourself and just say hi to everyone in the room.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dare. I mean, folks look forward to a very engaging session with you.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Apuva. Thanks for joining us today. So next is a very good friend of mine. We just met recently, but she's an awesome person and she's very supportive in a lot of ways. And she is the CEO of ACK ESM in Nigeria, which is the very awesome team that helps out with, brokering public-private partnerships in the healthcare space. And they're doing a lot of work in Nigeria currently. So kudos to your team, Azuka. Particularly with building and fortifying the supply chain of Africa. Azuka will be speaking on the topic financing the traceability skill gap of the public sector in supply chain. I'm just going to do a brief intro of Azuka. Azuka she oversees supply chain transformation projects in Nigeria and has also supported other African countries in strengthening their healthcare systems. She's best known for her expertise in engaging governments and development partners, as well as supporting them to prioritize and invest in the health supply chain programs across the continent. So welcome, Azuka. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you so much, Dari. Just to confirm, can you hear me clearly?
We can hear you loud and clear, Azuka. Welcome.
Thank you. It's awesome to be here and finally to be in the same space with Apuva. Nice to be here. Thank you.
Great. Awesome. Right. So I want to move to our next speaker, but unfortunately he couldn't join us today. So I'm just going to skip altogether and then we can focus on those of us in the room today. Yeah, of course, I'm going to introduce myself too. I think I did that earlier, but for those of us that missed it, I'll just do it again quite briefly. My name is Dari Odumade. I'm an entrepreneur. Yes, I've been doing this for 15 years now. And I'm an avid innovator. I love to innovate. And one of the key things that really inspires me in life is to solve key challenges or problems that relate to human life. And I just really discovered that about myself, probably like some 7-8 years ago, right? When I just realized that, there's a lot more that my skill in developing tech can do for Africa and the rest of the developing parts of the world. Based on the fact that we are also founders of the company Checky Technologies, and Checky Technologies is in the business of traceability and consumer intelligence. We're also proud to announce that we are the first and currently only GS1 certified traceability solution provider in Nigeria. So which puts us in the room to be more like seen as experts on this subject matter. I would love to share a lot of information with everyone in the room today. So thank you very much for joining us. Captains of industries, professionals in the healthcare space, and every other consumer or patient that has joined us today. Thank you very much for joining us. So now we're going to get straight into it. So before I go into question and answer, I think the first thing is to allow, probably start with the lady, Azuka, if you're ready to go. Let's talk a bit more about, finance for the traceability skill gap within the public sector supply chain. How do you think financing is going on? What do you think can be done better? I mean, if you have a couple of minutes to just share your experience with us on this particular topic.
Okay, thank you very much. And at such a time, you say ladies first, but no wahala, I'll start. Okay, so when you talk about traceability in the public
Azuka,
sector, yes, can you hear me?
just before you go, sorry to cut you. I don't know, do you have a presentation if you would like to share?
No,
Okay.
I can just talk through it.
Okay, sounds good. Please go ahead.
Okay, so when you talk about traceability in the public sector, it's something it's not new, particularly with I believe it was really introduced into the health supply chain system by USAID, if I'm correct, and working with GS1, based on the barcode system that they have. So they have been socializing this concept, and of recent, I know USAID started engaging NAFDAC to see how this can become an integral part of the health supply chain system. Several trainings, meetings, even with the Federal Ministry of Health to date, trying to see how this becomes an integral part of the supply chain system. So is something being done? Something is being done. So in terms of financing, it's still at that policy level, in my view. It hasn't, I mean, I don't think it has started there. There are barcodes for now being used within the health supply chain product lines. And I stand to be corrected, but there are conversations as in how can the Federal Ministry of Health integrate this in the system. Now, is this adequate? For me, it's when you talk about financing, because that is what our KSM really looks at, we always ask, the first question is, who is bringing the concept? Who is interested in this? Because it is the interest that drives the money. That's one. So when you look at something that is being introduced into the system, we always ask, is it a donor-driven agenda? Is it something the Federal Ministry of Health is driving as a policy decision? Or is it something state? Because, when you talk about implementing supply chain systems, it's being implemented at the sub-national level mostly, which is why it's important in Nigeria to understand the different levels of operation. Now, when you look at who is paying for and what are they paying for, one of the challenges I always start off, I mean, let me say one of the benefits we have experienced, or we have been able to take in as a country, is really that we have a lot of donor support for our public health programs, be it in malaria, HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, immunization, and these have primarily been supported by donors, whether for commodities. Now there is the new, I would say the marketplace currently is striving for the essential medicines program to be kickstarted across states. Why is that important? That is the only government-led and funded program, essential medicines program. Right now, several states have been running that program through their DMA, drug management agencies. This is important because when you talk about financing traceability, or even the introduction of the concept of traceability in Nigeria, it has been brought in by USAID. And USAID is focusing on the HIV/AIDS programs, the family planning to an extent. The discussion in the country, whenever you get to some of these issues, is if it is being introduced by USAID, will they fund traceability, the skill gap in traceability for HIV/AIDS program? Because these are the challenges we've always had, the parallel nature of managing health supply chains. Is USAID going to fund it for all programs, regardless of who is supporting the commodities? Or is USAID introducing the concept of traceability because of the HIV/AIDS program? Then they will train the human resource for that program. Now, what can we do better? Because one of the challenges we've always encountered is that when it is a concept being driven by donors, at some point the expectation is that government takes it on. That has not worked in so many ways. So in being very practical about financing, which is, I would have loved to start off with approval and the concept and the word traceability and the serialization work, because talking about finance is very practical. If it is a donor-driven concept, it becomes challenging for you to scale. If the issue of the concept of traceability is being introduced through a government program like Essential Medicines, which covers the wider range of commodities, be sure that the government will finance it, because within their system, they actually have funds for paying for supply chain. And again, it also depends on, when you talk about traceability, are we looking at from the manufacturer downstream? In Nigeria, in the health, let me say the public health system, most times programs are not directly involved with the manufacturers. So is it something, that's why sometimes people struggle with the NAFDAC involvement. Is the issue of traceability just at the product manufacturing line, because manufacturers will sell to the public sector down to the store, but they are not really going to look downstream to the customers. So if I am a manufacturer and I am to finance traceability gap, I'm going to probably focus in the area of the product quality, making sure that I have the barcodes, or I use whatever is the RFID, whatever system. But I may not be so interested in financing the skill gap for last mile, the person taking that off. So these are things we can do better in Nigeria to define what will government pay for when they talk about the skill gap. Will they pay for the aspect of the importance of traceability and risk management, the issue of recall, the issue of making sure there are no fake commodities downstream? They may not be so interested in the issue of traceability within the manufacturing space. So those are the things we can do better. Better coordination involving the systems that can pay for it within government, making sure that we do not just focus on NAFDAC involvement and Federal Ministry of Health involvement, because you will not get, I'm just saying this cautiously, you may not get it financed by government. It will remain a donor-supported system, which may not be sustainable. Thank you very much.
Awesome, Azuka, that's beautifully put. Thank you so much for that very elaborate explanation. I do think, I agree with you on so many levels, and it's something I've experienced firsthand as well. However, for the sake of everyone in the room, I think it's important that before we then come to, because I can see already there are a couple of questions for you, Azuka, in the chat. But I don't want us to jump to those questions just yet, because I can tell that the conversation will be very exciting, right? But what I'm thinking about, just before we go into the questions with Azuka, why don't I just come in and just really give everyone more like a quick understanding of what traceability really is. Why is this a very important conversation that we need to have? And what can we even look forward to within the Nigerian ecosystem, particularly when it comes to implementation of traceability? What can we look forward to at the last mile, right? What can be the expectation of the everyday consumer that either goes to a public infrastructure or a private infrastructure to get their healthcare needs? Or what does this also mean for the local manufacturers and importers of pharmaceutical products into the country? And what are the cost implications for them as well? And then, of course, the skill gap financing, just like Azuka just spoke about, we can now really delve deeper into that and really understand how can we unlock finance for traceability adoption within the Africa supply chain. So permit me to just quickly stop sharing my screen and then share the slide that I've prepared to sort of speak more to this topic. So my slides are really going to be primarily not a lot. I'm also going to spend just as short as Azuka was straightforward to sharing her points. I'm also going to share similar points of view in terms of giving you very clear, straight to the point details about this. So I'm sharing my screen now. All right. So yeah, I'm back. So yeah, can everyone see my screen? So if I'm sharing the right screen, you should be seeing cost-effective traceability systems by Checkit. So first of all, right, what exactly is traceability? And that is what my presentation outline will be focused on, right? What is product traceability? What are the technologies necessary for implementing product traceability and supply chain traceability? What are the types of traceability systems? What is the benefits of traceability to the end consumer and also to the brands, to the manufacturing brands, right? And then finally, 5 easy steps to implement cost-effective inline and outline traceability. So first off, what exactly is product traceability? Product traceability basically is the use of unique IDs, or more like a serialization system, to enable the ease of identifying products and also tracking and tracing products throughout the supply chain, from production points all the way to the final consumer. How this happens is, firstly, there's a need for a serialization system. So a system that generates unique IDs. Unique IDs are represented in this deck as UID, which means unique ID for short. Now, unique IDs these unique IDs can be in form of serial codes, in form of data matrix codes, as you see on most pharmaceutical packs. It could be in form of QR codes, as you see in some regulatory guidance in some regions. Like India, for instance, has traceability on QR codes, not data matrix codes. You've also probably seen RFID tags and sensors, right? All of these are different technologies or tools that are used for generating unique IDs that are then traced throughout the supply chain. Now, after you generate the unique IDs, to actually handle the process of track and trace, there's a need for devices such as your barcode scanners, or even a smartphone, or even a smartphone-enabled barcode scanner, right? You see different industrial machines that are used. I'm going to show you a couple in this presentation as well shortly. Then, of course, traceability became more of a very popular topic over just the last decade, but the problem that traceability solves is an age-long problem, right? Problem of counterfeiting, problem of product diversion, right? Either product diversion within the private supply chain, or even product diversion within the public supply chain. One of the key things that really led into the wide use of traceability, because of course there's been a lot of discussion about it decades back, but of course most of these systems have been seen to be very complicated in terms of actually implementing in organizations until when the US regulation passes as a standard for pharmaceuticals in 2013. Then tobacco units tracking also came up in the European Union in 2014. And then the rest of the world started taking on traceability one after the other. And now we are at the point where Nigeria is also interested in standardizing traceability by 2025 in the ecosystem, which is why it's important that we start having these conversations now to understand, what are the needs to be able to implement traceability easily within your organizations or within the local supply chain, whether in the public sector or in the private sector. And now that brings us to what are the key technologies required to implement, product and supply chain traceability. Like I mentioned earlier, the first key thing is to have that traceability system that generates the unique IDs. The unique IDs, again, could be QR codes, they could be data matrix codes, they could be RFID tags, they could be sensors, right? Whatever it is that we could use as a unique identifier to identify a product can be considered as a unique ID. However, at Checkit, what we do is we log these unique IDs on the blockchain network, right? Now, these unique IDs are either printed directly on the product packs, as you can see at the bottom here, right? So they're either printed directly on the product pack on the production line, right? Which requires some level of, higher sophistication, like a printer, a digital printer you would have on the production line that can generate these unique IDs in form of stickers, or you just print them directly on the product pack. But there's also a way to do that here locally, which is what we call the outline serialization process, right? In most cases, most manufacturers know about the inline serialization process, which requires a lot of intensive capital investment, right? Of course, you need to invest in widening your production line. Your conveyor belt also has to be sophisticated enough to have digital cameras around specific areas, enough to commission and decommission these serial codes on the production line. As you can see here, this image below, you can see the serial codes packed in alignment in this linear form, to make it easier for the camera, which is facing them from the opposite end, to scan them, right, in the process of either commissioning or decommissioning, right? You can also see them on the side as well, right? So it's intentional for the production line to be in that manner. So these digital cameras like this can handle the action of scanning them. However, we could also do the same thing in the outline process, right, where Checkit can provide for you, take for instance, a small printer, right, that is also connected to a computer to print these unique IDs. And then these stickers, or it's print these unique IDs out on stickers, and then these stickers can be placed manually on boxes, on cartons, and then a barcode scanner or a smartphone can be used for the commissioning action and the rest of the actions, right, to implement traceability locally. So like I mentioned already, there's a need for dedicated scanners or smartphone devices, right, in terms of outline serialization. But inline serialization, cameras in the production line would handle the same activity, right? Then we have the action of logistics units tracking for containers and trucks via GPS. One of the major practical use of traceability in the past and to date is largely to just identify where is the location of these particular assets at the moment. Logistics units use it a lot. DHL and the likes use it very commonly for their own operations as well, to track the locations of different assets, whether it has been delivered or it has not been delivered. And this is also basically relies on the principle of traceability, which is a unique ID that is being scanned. Now, the next step after that is the importance of interoperability between systems. So there will be the need for you to then integrate your systems together. So you would have a holistic supply chain system that makes it easy for data transfer across these different systems. So instead of having to have a different way, the ERPs understand your product in a different way, your machineries on the supply chain understand your product's code in a different way, the warehouse or inventory solution understands your products with a different code. That's not what we're trying to achieve. Traceability systems try to put together all of these systems to understand one common language, which is that common serial code that we use for the product packs, either at the units level, the carton level, or the pallet level. Then, of course, you need to have a sophisticated traceability platform with automated insights, automated intelligence, which is one of the key things that we provide at Checkit. So I'm going to move from this real quick to talk about the types of traceability systems. So there are two types majorly in terms of traceability systems, right? There is the upstream and the downstream. On the upstream side, not a lot of countries are yet to actually input or enforce the use of upstream serialization within the space, but a lot of commercialization on the downstream side, or a lot of implementation of traceability and enforcing it on downstream side has been seen. In India, currently, there is that enforcement to bring in traceability at the upstream side. What does the upstream mean and what does downstream mean? Basically, the upstream means your inputs. So if you're, take for instance, engine oil production, right? What are the raw materials that goes into engine oil production? Where are they sourced, right? So as you can see here in this image, talks about, getting the petroleum, the crude from the ground, right? And then transporting it in barrels to the point where it to be, converted, fractionally distilled, and then converted into engine oils, right? Now, the process of upstream traceability is having unique IDs on these barrels. So these barrels, as they're coming out and going into so before they go into production for their end products to be extracted, they would have a unique ID as well. So this unique ID information goes into the ERP of the manufacturer, and it can be pulled into the serial code of the products that is finally produced. So such that when a consumer authenticates this product, they can actually see the audit trail in terms of, okay, what exactly were the materials that went into production of this item? How can we identify them? What are the unique identifiers? Who are the manufacturers or who are the suppliers of these raw materials? Then which company produced it? Who are the distributors that bought it from the company? Who are the wholesalers that bought it from the distributors as well before you hand it up with a retailer, right? So you've got all these different steps of audits that you can trace easily with the traceability system. Now, again, upstream talks about the raw materials, right? The raw materials that goes into the production of the finished goods, right? And then the downstream talks about after production of the finished goods, how it actually being moved from the warehouse all the way through the supply chain to the retailer and the final consumer. Traceability of downstream handles that. Again, I've mentioned about the outline and inline traceability implementation. The inline is definitely more expensive, but of course it's more holistic, right? It has to do with you integrating all your systems together and then providing more sophisticated tools on your production line, including your conveyor belts, the cameras for authenticating the barcodes or the serial codes on the product. And then you've got the system that also does the printing of the serial codes on the system, right? Now, in terms of outline traceability, which is one of the areas that we want to talk about today, and we're talking about it majorly because it's a more cost-effective approach, particularly for the DMAs or even the local manufacturers in Nigeria. Even in some cases for the DMAs, we may not necessarily even have to go with the outline traceability, right? Because for some of the products that are being purchased in the public sector, they already have serial codes on them, right? And we can leverage those existing serial codes as well to do some other work within the supply chain, which I'm going to touch on shortly. Now, in terms of the traceability solution that we provide in the downstream, we can provide you with a generates unique IDs and print out unique IDs rather in sticker forms. Now, these stickers can then be taken off manually and stock on the product packs. And also this traceability follows the same conformity of the global standard traceability. So basically you can have the action of commissioning, you can have the action of packing on the software that we provided. So this packing, basically you're packing the primary packs into the secondary pack. Basically you're packing the carton into the box, you're packing the box into the pallet. So the pallet can have one code and it will have access to all the codes in the pallet. So the carton codes and the unit pack codes, right? You can scan the carton code and to have access to all the unit pack codes as well, right? So the aggregation and the aggregation process can be done as well with this system using just this very small printer. But of course, it will require a lot of manual work on having the barcode scanner to perform the actions of packing and shipping, right? Whereas on the inline serialization side, you can achieve this by just having the cameras on the production line that takes a picture of the serial codes. Now, these same serial codes can be used for inventory control purposes, right? So inventory management with the handheld barcode scanners, as you can see in this image here. And it will help with inventory control as well. So you can leverage it for actions like stock taking or stock count, which can help to, reduce chances of product diversion within the public into the private supply chain, or within even the private supply chain. And then finally, consumers can also verify this product, the final product, by scanning the QR code on them or the data matrix code on them. And with the Check It app, they can do more, which is we can now further engage the consumers as well and give them rewards for taking this action. But the data we extract from these engagements can then be used for intelligent insights to supply to the manufacturers of this brand. So this is more like what the software looks like, right? The dashboard looks like in terms of you can generate serial unique IDs. You can measure the authentications that are coming on a daily basis, weekly basis, monthly basis. You can extract this from data that's connected, and you can see very intelligent suggestions based on correlation of the survey data. You can see locations where these authentications are coming from. Also have a trail that shows you, what exactly is the line, the relationship between these products that are moving within the supply chain, using this Check It's traceability platform. And this just talk about the consumer side as well. When consumers verify, they would see the authentication process, and you can see the audit trail, who the manufacturer is, who the distributor is, and the consumers can claim a price by taking a brief survey, which is 2 or 3 questions, which is how we sort of.
Daria, are you still there? Can any other person hear me? So I'm sure it's not me.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Yes, we can hear you.
Yes, Apuva, maybe you can. Apuva, maybe you
actually,
can go on. Yes.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Because we have a hard stop in 10 minutes as well. So, look, folks, on my end, I think the topic which I want to address is a little bit about working relationship between the donors and the manufacturers, and traceability, among other things which are important there. At a global level, there is a lot of impetus and a lot of discussion and focus about, making sure that there's harmony between the access of donors, manufacturers, and the receiving countries. The reason for that is, in very simple way, the reason for that is the cost of delivering aid is effectively a big portion compared to other industries or other similar setups. And the reason that the cost of delivering that aid is so high is primarily at high level. Again, one, that the operational procedures of different donors is extremely different, and the receiving countries have to do a lot of adaptation for it. Sometimes it would just be as a very high cost for them, especially the poorest countries. Sometimes you need different administrative capacities. Sometimes you need different development plans. So it really troubles the public management system of the receiving countries. Similarly, donors who are also huge buyers for manufacturers, if they have different requirements, I mean, the manufacturing cost, more than manufacturing cost, the manufacturing capacity is affected a lot by serving different donors. So at a global level, we have a lot of focus on trying to make sure that there's harmony in operational procedures at the highest standard, and as a result, the whole transaction cost will come down. As a whole result, delivery will become more flexible, because if the manufacturer 1 have similar processes to manufacturer 2, the donor 1 can sort of interact alongside manufacturer 1 and 2. And at some point, when the standardization is sort of complete, the national development needs of a country like Nigeria can be also the focus and can effectively be owned by the recipient country. Traceability is a big part of standardization. Okay, there are other things, there are SOPs and processes which are being standardized, but traceability effectively is single key which manages that piece and says, okay, this is a thread which ties the whole standardization together. And that's why it's extremely important. We do believe that if the donor agencies, they work with the manufacturers, they will prevent a lot of unnecessary duplication of work for both the agencies. And things like audit reports, diagnostic works, some of those kind of things, which sometimes the donor countries have to also give more detailed stock reports and stuff like that. That will become very streamlined for the donor countries, and that is why it's imperative that most of the donor organizations now are working with manufacturing organizations to standardize the whole process. And like Dare was saying, I mean, there's a lot of focus on traceability. So that's what couple of examples from consumer goods industry as well are very relevant. I've been with consumer goods industry for quite some time now, and surprisingly, the regulations are stricter in food products and stuff like that. So the whole identification and tagging system has been quite strong. That is the single most enabling factor for digitizing of the supply chain. The fact that there is a unique identification system across the in the product is the single most enabler for the digitization. And because of digitization, there is a lot of seamless back and forth in terms of order management, in terms of procurement, in terms of supply management. So what we have seen is in consumer goods is that the fact that traceability is implemented really helped increase the sales, really helped increase the customer experience, really helped increase things like fraud and stuff to go. Like, I mean, classic example is Nokia and IMEI, right? I mean, every second phone of Nokia at one point was being duplicated or faked. Now, I mean, it's very easy. You can go on a Nokia website and check whether your phone is original or not, which factory was it made under a commissioned Nokia license, or it was made by a factory which is commissioned by Nokia, but actually was not ordered by Nokia, and so on and so forth, right? So it helped a lot on consumer satisfaction, service related issues, and stuff like that. I think that's why it's extremely important. And we see a little bit more progress in recent times on this, largely because of some effort by big donor organizations. So I think, yeah, that's pretty much the whole point of why the donor organizations should work with the manufacturers to improve traceability among other standardizations.
Great. Thank you very much, Apuva. So sorry about my internet. I had to drop off and then join back. But thank you very much, Apuva, for covering extensively on your own experience on traceability. And I do think it goes beyond just the healthcare space, right? It's into every consumer good, electronics, as you made example of, consumer goods in general. But we see the effect a lot around the healthcare space. With people dying as a result of counterfeit products coming to the system. And the issue of counterfeits is really primarily as a result of lack of traceability within the supply chain in Africa.
Exactly. And I mean, look, I think somewhere I read it, we were in some of the global, one of the Global Fund seminars when we read that 22% of the medicines never get utilized in the right way because the stock is not present at the place where it is needed, and vice versa. Sometimes there is stock and there is no need for vaccines and medicines, and there's a lot of effort which some of these agencies are also spending in sort of doing the right stock allocation. But that right stock allocation at last mile is not possible, especially not possible real time if you don't know where your stock is. And that's also very imperative in sort of not just making sure that you know where your product is, but the ability to take decisions to push the product or push the supply in the right direction, depending on the current equations, is also extremely critical. And that's why having that record is very important in supply chain.
Absolutely, Apuva. Thank you very much. And now also, when we talk about this record being available, do we think this? Do we say this record should be available publicly, right? In the sense of, it probably like a newsletter that gets published every month by the government indicating, these are the products that entered into the system or entered into the ecosystem, right? Doesn't necessarily mean, we're sharing information of the serial codes of the products, but rather more like a bulletin that just says this, products came into the ecosystem and this is so dates and they're from this XYZ manufacturer, right? Would it be important for us to have this data in public domain, or is it only important, for governance purpose or for regulatory purpose? What would you say?
Look, I mean, I think Azuka is probably better placed than me to answer this, but there is, when we sit with the donor organizations and talk, especially likes of USAID and Melinda Gates Foundation, there seems to be an underlying current which says that the receiving countries need to give accountability, and there is this constant vibe that the accountability is missing, and we don't know where actually our medicines go. Now, should the record be public or should the record be not public is very sensitive and extremely government sort of topic. But I do believe that the information need to exist, and people have right to ask for it depending on where people are. I mean, if you are in health system in Nigeria, or if you vote, I mean, practical purposes, if you've even voted for the president of Nigeria, the president of Nigeria is liable to you. So yeah, I mean, there are things like RTI Act in many countries in the world where people have the right to information as a basic fundamental right. So they can ask. Now, should it be published as a newsletter or not? I mean, depends on demand, to be honest.
Great, Apuva. Azuka, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I laughed when Apuva said it's not a simple question, and it's not you can't get a simple answer with that. Again, is when you say government, who is government? Who are we talking to? I like what Apuva said in his presentation, is that it goes beyond the technology. We need to look at things like the SOPs, the standardization, the agreement of what is to be shared and who is to be shared and who is doing what. So it is with the standards that are put in place that then mandates government to do this or do that. So I think we are still getting there, and which is why in my conversation I said, I think the donors are a bit more coordinated. The donors know what they want. The donors know what they want to fund and who to fund. What is still work in progress is which government entity and how do we coordinate in country to work with donors on this. That for me is work in progress and is not yet clear. I don't know if that is helpful.
No, absolutely. That's super. I do agree that I think it's one step at a time. The most important part is to actually have the government sustainably continue to provide adequate resources and infrastructure for the citizens, right? And it's cuts across the different sectors of the government. But traceability, the public supply chain is definitely of keen interest in the case of pharmaceuticals, as the case of counterfeit and the likes are becoming regular news updates, across the continent. There was a question earlier for Azuka from Isaac. Isaac, I don't know if you want to repeat that question, but I think the question, if I can just rephrase shortly, but I don't see the question anymore in the chat group. But I think it was around, access to finance. Isaac,
I can ask if you ask. Yeah.
Sure. Let's go ahead.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes, loud and clear.
All right. Thanks, Azuka. I thought that was like super helpful, and it's nice to hear what role ARC ESM is playing, because I think like probably public-private partnerships are key. The question that I had was around, besides the models that you're proposing and working with government on, and the focus on like donors, I think there's an opportunity. Like, I'm based in the diaspora and I'm Nigerian, right? There's an opportunity to harness the diaspora from an impact-linked bond perspective to finance project like this, traceability and the rest of it, where of course, like government is providing some backing, but the funds themselves are not coming from donors, but they're coming from diaspora-based investors that, hey, want some sort of return that is linked to impact, but two, want to actually like contribute to the development of the country, right? Like overall. And so that becomes like a viable alternative too, right? And those bonds can be traded and listed on like local exchange in Nigeria, and people can see the details on it and get like reports quarterly or like annually.
Yeah, thank you very much, Isaac. I mean, there are different models that can work. One of the things, and we have seen a lot of, diaspora-led groups or even individuals that have actually come to us to say, how do I play in this space, even if it's just to provide my expertise? One of the things, and it still goes back to the last question that Dari asked, is that, and this is what we push for co-investment and not full investment, even with donors. We work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation to manage their supply chain investment in Nigeria. And one of the things we have said to them is, even for the donors to manage their expectations and how they invest in supply chains, if donors want to invest in as per emergency supply chains, that is totally okay. Emergencies, government does not have the structure, government does not have the funding. I'm going to invest, and I'm not going to expect government to co-invest at any point or take on investment. That is perfect. But the approach of full donor investment and then later government to take on investment has not worked. One of the things we have said to the foundation is, government in Nigeria, they have the funds. We can't even say they don't have the funds. The more we push for donor investment, the more our government moves the money to other areas and then says there is money coming from donors. I think even the donors are aware of the detrimental effects of continuous aid beyond emergency. The PEPFAR fund was an emergency fund. We have bypassed that, and we must not continue in that process. So one of the things we're saying to donors is, find out where government is investing in supply chains, then co-invest. That's the model we have used with our PPP, particularly with the pharma group, with Live Bank Last Mile Solutions. And we hope to see that even for traceability. If governments are purchasing commodities from the pharma companies, the pharma can take on part of the financing for traceability to the point where it concerns them. Government must take on the part that it concerns them, but that can only be achieved within the Essential Medicines Program, which is fully government funded. So in that regard, when you talk about diaspora can come in where there is evidence that government is responsible in setting up their own infrastructure, in paying for a certain degree, and then we see the gap and say, who can co-invest? What we do not promote is full donor or full partner investment. That does not promote a sustainable way of running health supply chain in Nigeria. So I don't know if you get, it's co-investment rather than full investment. Thank you.
Awesome. Thanks a lot for that, Azuka. Isaac, are you fine with the answer? Or you have a follow-up question?
No, I thought that was great. I'm a huge fan of co-investment. I think having that shared ownership and accountability and responsibilities is necessary for competitiveness generally and for impact. Absolutely. So it's a good one.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Isaac, for the question. As we wrap up, are there any other questions? Apuv had to drop off. Apuv has dropped off because he had family dinner to attend to. But I mean, we're still here for probably the next 2 or 3 minutes. Are there any other questions? The conversation has been very intelligent and insightful as well, generally. And I'm sure everyone on the call has learned a lot from our speakers today. But are there any other last questions, perhaps, that anyone wants to get off their mind before we wrap up? if you have a question, feel free to unmute yourself, raise up your hand, and then unmute yourself and ask the question. But if not, Azuka, thank you very much. You've been very super helpful, very insightful conversations and ideas. And of course, your knowledge in the industry is also very much reputable, particularly for this conversation. So I really want to appreciate you for joining us here today.
Thank you, Dari, and look forward to more of this series. I listened to one. I started listening to the one on YouTube. So thank you for having these sessions, and hopefully we will do more of this, even for government. Again, they said the timing, because of the fasting period, they couldn't come and pray and all. But we'll take this offline and plan one for them. Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, everyone. Thanks a lot for joining. Thank you very much, Azuka. Really enjoy this. We will definitely share out this video as well. So for those of us that missed some part of it, we'll share the video for everyone as well to be a part of this conversation. And we're definitely going to continue doing this series, as Azuka mentioned, probably another set for the government, so we can actually have feedback directly from the government as well on the public supply chain side. But thank you, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye for now.